In the summer of 2009, a single transfer didn't just move a player from one team to another. It completely redrew the map of world football. Cristiano Ronaldo left Manchester United for Real Madrid, and honestly, nothing was ever the same again. But what if it never happened? What if he'd stayed put? Okay, let's really get into this and explore the timeline that almost was. This whole story, it doesn't start with numbers or tactics. It starts with regret. The regret of Sir Alex Ferguson, maybe the greatest manager of all time. This wasn't just some business deal he wished he could undo. No, this was a decision that he felt personally shifted the entire course of his club's history and his own legacy. That right there tells you just how heavy this moment truly was. £80 million. At the time, that was a world record fee. A number so huge, it just seemed impossible to say no to. With that one check, Real Madrid didn't just buy a player. They bought a whole new center of gravity for the entire sport. So here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll look at that pivotal moment back in 2009. Then we're going to build out an alternate timeline based on what we know. We'll dive into how football's biggest awards would have been completely rewritten, explore the crazy global consequences, and wrap it all up with a big unanswered question. Right, let's set the scene. The year is 2009, and Manchester United, they aren't just a top club. They are the club, the team to beat. And Cristiano Ronaldo, he's their undisputed king. This is that fork in the road, the one where everything we think we know about modern football could have gone in a totally different direction. Let's be crystal clear about this. Ronaldo wasn't leaving some team on the decline. He was 24 years old, at the absolute peak of his powers. He was the reigning Ballon d'Or winner, the undisputed best player on the planet, playing for the most feared team in all of Europe. He literally had it all. And to really get his impact, just look at the numbers. He was coming off a 42-goal season as a winger. Think about that. At the time, that was the single greatest season any winger had ever had in the entire history of English football. This wasn't just some great player, he was the engine of that whole United machine. So, for our alternate universe, we're going to make one tiny change to history. Ferguson says no. That £80 million check gets sent back. That phone call that shifted the balance of power in world football, it never hits its target. Ronaldo stays right where he is. So, if he stays, what happens next? Well, this isn't just pure guesswork. We can actually project a new future for him and for Manchester United based on the performance trajectory he was already on. So, how do we build this alternate reality? We use something called a statistical trajectory. Now, in simple terms, we just look at his development curve at United, his year-over-year improvement in goals, assists, everything, and we just project that line forward. This gives us a really credible, evidence-based foundation for everything that comes next. And this is the key number our model spits out, 45. 45 goals, that's the average number of goals the data suggests Ronaldo would have scored per season if he'd stayed in a United shirt in a league and a team he already knew how to completely dominate. And this just perfectly illustrates the result. First, a huge new contract in 2009. Then, with Ronaldo firing on all cylinders, United are projected to win back-to-back Premier League titles in 2010 and 2011. And then the big one. They lift the Champions League trophy again in 2013. We're not talking about just a successful team anymore. We're talking about a dynasty. Okay, this is where things get really, really interesting and maybe a little controversial. How does one player staying at one club completely rewrite the history of football's most prestigious individual award, the Ballon d'Or? Just look at this comparison. In our reality, Lionel Messi wins 4 straight awards from 2009 to 2012, a run that nobody had ever seen before. But in a world where Ronaldo is leading United to Premier League titles and Champions League finals, that monopoly gets shattered. Conservative models suggest the awards are split, 2 apiece. The entire narrative of that era just changes completely. So here's the bottom line, the story that defined an entire generation of football. The untouchable genius of Messi during his golden decade, it just doesn't happen that way. The debate becomes messier, much more contested, right from the very start. And what about the gaffer? Sir Alex Ferguson, who retired in 2013 in our timeline. Now he's got every reason to stay on. With another Champions League trophy in the cabinet and his team just dominating Europe, he gets to end his incredible career truly on his own terms, cementing a full decade of dominance. But this one decision, it doesn't just affect Manchester. Its consequences ripple outwards, changing the fortunes of other clubs, other managers, and even entire leagues. This is the butterfly effect for real. We can basically break down these global consequences into three key areas. First, Real Madrid is a club left without its king. Second, the legendary managerial career of Zinedine Zidane is completely altered. And third, the Premier League's rise to global dominance happens a whole decade early. Without Ronaldo, Real Madrid is a club without a face. They spend years and millions trying to find a replacement they never find. In that historic run, those 3 consecutive Champions League titles from 2016 to 2018, it just doesn't exist. That dynasty is wiped from the history books. And just think about that domino effect for a second. Zinedine Zidane's legendary status as a manager was built on winning those 3 European Cups with Ronaldo as his guy. Without those titles, he probably never even gets that opportunity. One of the greatest managerial runs ever is just gone, erased. And finally, the whole balance of power between leagues shifts dramatically. With the world's best player lighting up Old Trafford every single week, the Premier League's commercial power and global viewership just explode, nearly a decade ahead of schedule. And La Liga, whose whole identity was built on that Messi-Ronaldo rivalry, loses half its stardust overnight. So after we've reshaped clubs, careers, and entire leagues, we come back to the central debate that this one decision completely transforms, the ultimate question of who's the greatest. So just think about it. One decision. It leads to a more dominant Manchester United, a weaker Real Madrid, no Zidane dynasty, and a totally different Ballon d'Or history. The butterfly effect is very, very real. And that leaves us with the final, unanswered question, the one this entire alternate history really hinges on. In this world, where Ronaldo stays and builds this unmatched dynasty at United, who do we remember as the greatest of all time? Is it still Messi, or does Cristiano Ronaldo finally claim that crown? I'll leave that one for you to decide.